but it would have taken a lot away from all the goodwill, too, that was engendered when Obama made his Cairo speech, too. So I think it was a huge mistake on a number of levels, and there's been nothing since then to indicate that anything's going to change. So 4 days after Hillary makes this announcement, we have Dr. Saeed Erekat, who is the head of the PLO Negotiating Affairs Department, making a statement, and let me just... If the U.S. administration cannot compel Israel to stop settlements for natural growth in Jerusalem and the commitment to establishment of a Palestinian state within 24 months remains mere talk, the U.S. administration must declare Israel the obstructionist side if it does not commit to the roadmap obligations. He pointed out the negotiations did not start this year, but reached a very advanced stage in December 2008 between Abbas and Olmert. He added, "We demand that negotiations resume where they left off." He said the exclusion of Jerusalem from the settlement freeze means the continuing political pillaging of Jerusalem and the continuing settlement construction in it to achieve Netanyahu's goal of increasing the number of settlers in East Jerusalem to 28,000 by 2011. He pointed out there is an Israeli plan to reduce the number of Arabs in Jerusalem, who now constitute 32%, to 12% by 2020. He pointed out that a temporary freeze on the settlement construction in the West Bank will actually increase overall settlements by 2.8% because of the number of housing units in Jerusalem as compared to the West Bank. In other words, it's a big smokescreen. So he wanted the U.S. to compel Israel to implement its obligations. Now, for those that are not familiar, in 1967, in 1948, Jerusalem was split into two, East and West, and East became sort of part of the West Bank under Arab control, and the West was under Israeli control. And after '67, they took over East Jerusalem, and not only retained it, but passed a law that said that Jerusalem, the whole of Jerusalem, is the capital of Israel. And so that's why Israel takes such a hard-line position. But they have to understand that unless they are prepared to negotiate on Jerusalem, I'll go into this a little bit further, the settlement process is just not going to happen. Now, what's interesting is, going back to Erekat, what he said is we're in this is in November, we are not short of options. If the two-state option is excluded, there is the option of a one-state, as happened in South Africa. I know, Philip, you're enchanted with the one-state solution. Anyway, you're going to hear more about the one-state. The situation in the West Bank is worse than it was in South Africa. Now, that was on the 5th. The next day, President Mahmoud Abbas says he wants to stand down, and he declines to run in the election. But he said he'd be prepared to stick around until the election is held, which looks like June. In other words, he was giving a signal to Israel, if you want to negotiate with me, and he's considered the obvious choice that Israel would want to negotiate with him rather than somebody from Hamas, I'm only going to be around for another 6 months, so you better get with the program. I mean, that's, I think, the clear message, but we don't have any movement from Israel on that. there's also there's a Jordanian daily paper where an editor made this comment that what Americans do not know while dealing with this extremely sensitive issue is that Palestine, for the Arabs and Muslims, is Jerusalem, and that Jerusalem is the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This is what makes Mahmoud Abbas adopt this hardline stand. In other words, if you go back, Arafat wanted Jerusalem to be the capital of Palestine. Then he modified his position after a number of years to say, okay, East Jerusalem will be, rather than the whole of Jerusalem, being realistic and so on. But they hold it very, very, it's a holy place. It's one of the holiest cities in the world from a number of religions, the Christians and the Muslims and the Jewish state. And it's, and I'll go into that in just 1 second, but I just want to say that the reaction in Israel the other reactions that followed from this as well, the Palestinian Authority, through another spokesperson, warned a few days after this that violence will be inevitable in the region should the U.S. fail to force Israel into halting settlement activity. Violence will rush in to fill the void left by the failure of efforts to relaunch the peace process. And they basically said the peace process has hit a dead end because of Israelis' intransigence. Then you have, day after that, you have Syria getting in on the discussion and saying, less than 2 weeks after declaring his desire for peace talks with Israel, Syrian President Bashar Assad warned that if negotiations fail, it will result in resistance as an alternative option. He spoke at an economic summit at the Islamic Conference in Istanbul on the 10th of... Now, if you remember too, before Netanyahu came into power, Israel was making, under Olmert, was making a lot of progress with Syria. There was because they want to get back the Golan Heights, and there was, everybody expected that that was going to bear fruit, and then that would carry forward into the Palestinian situation. So the fact that Israel has experienced frustration with the Netanyahu government doesn't bode well, because if violence does break out, then it could be on several fronts. And Syria has a lot of control over Hezbollah, who are in Lebanon, and we know that Hezbollah are armed to the teeth with Iranian missiles. It could be sort of a nasty situation if that evolves. Let's hope that it doesn't, but it's a very serious situation. Then, amidst all this, you would think that maybe Israel would step back a bit and say, well, we'll reconsider, but instead of doing that, they aggravated the situation even more. On November the 18th, they gave the green light to build 900 new housing units in the Jerusalem neighborhood of Gilo, located beyond the Green Line. The Green Line is the 1948 border line that was made. And that, and even though it's not part of the old city, it's still part of Jerusalem as defined by the borders, so it's within Jerusalem proper. Israel takes the position that Jerusalem is Jewish, will always be Jewish, and there's no discussion. That's the main thing.